me just say this. I really like in the back of my mind, I hated hearing you say that, reliving last season for Auburn, where it seemed like every punter that faced Auburn was a guy who was pinning Auburn down inside the 10-yard line every other time. I was just like, yo, did they just transplant the spirit of Ray Guy into every punter right before this game? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. Your guy, Ike Jones, here. Thank you so much for turning us on and turning us up. We are here talking a little bit Auburn versus Baylor in fall camp. And joining me, I've got my guy. Well, I'm calling him my guy. We just got acquainted, Grayson here. And he's going to be the guy breaking it all down for us in terms of Baylor. Grayson, appreciate you first and foremost for taking a little time to come on. You are adept at all things Baylor, so we will definitely make sure that we get a good, wholesome conversation and encompass all the things necessary to get Auburn fans informed in case they don't want to go and listen to your podcast, which first and foremost, tell the people about where you are doing your thing over there in the Baylor side.
Right. So I do a lot of our content on SicEm365.com. Been doing it now for 7 years. We love it. It's been great. If you want to listen to Baylor content, we also have a YouTube channel at SicEm365 as well. And a free podcast, the Bearcast. We kind of do content every once in a while on there as well. And it goes to the YouTube channel or to our podcast feed. So all kinds of good stuff. If you want to just kind of hear more about Baylor and hear more about kind of the matchup against Auburn, even though we're going to talk plenty about it here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in. Before we get into the specifics of the three phases of the game, let's talk a little bit about just overall temperament of the Baylor fan base around this season. Baylor's coming into the year. A lot of people, they're kind of like a popular pick right now for being one of the top finishers in the Big 12, going off of a pretty good season last year, probably a little underwhelming in some aspects, but overachieving a little bit towards the end of the year. You know, Baylor picked up some momentum, particularly the offensive side of the football. Just kind of where does the fan base feel about this season?
Man, I'll tell you what, the fan base, I don't think could be any more excited. And honestly, I know you mentioned Baylor being a popular pick, but I mean, the Vegas line is still only at 7.5. Like the expectations are, I think, somewhat there nationally, but internally and from the Baylor fan base, the expectations are a whole lot more than 7.5. And I think that it really just comes down to, you look at last year, I know, in some areas, maybe some could say overachieved, like you mentioned, but I think it's important to remember, I mean, they lost their first game of the year without starting Sawyer Robertson because they decided to go with Daquan Fenn to start the year, which ended up being a huge mistake. And so then you get through that first half of the year, Sawyer Robertson hadn't gotten all the snaps. He was splitting with the ones and twos. And I think it really impacted them early on. And they finally caught some momentum. Once he became the starter, they hit the bye week. And after the bye week, they went 6-1 to finish the season, with their only loss being to LSU in the bowl game.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, well, let's dive in. You mentioned his name, Sawyer Robertson. I think if you're talking about a guy who nationally may be a little under the radar as far as how good he actually is at the quarterback position, he's definitely, for me, one of, when I look at the quarterbacks that Auburn is going to have to face this season, that's a pretty tough test right out of the gate for what I consider to be one of the better dual threat quarterbacks that Auburn's going to have to go against, because I don't know that people understand how good Sawyer Robertson is with his legs. But just talk to me a little bit about the Baylor offense and specifically what you think Sawyer Robertson is going to bring to this competition.
It's funny that you mentioned his legs because in the second half, really towards the end of the season, he was dealing with an ankle injury, and that part of his game was kind of taken away. You saw it in the bowl game. He just was not the runner that he was early on in the season. So he definitely can run. He's a very good athlete, very good straight line speed, can do the QB power type stuff pretty well to help them move the chains. But man, the biggest thing is he's just a very accurate quarterback and a tremendous leader. And all those things were on full display. Like once they made the move to him, everything changed for the offense, particularly I think just being more efficient. And then the accuracy part, like you can't describe how impactful that is, and accuracy on the deep ball too. He really was able to find some flow and find some rhythm. And that kind of coincided with the fact that they also got their run game going once they made some changes on the offensive line. Bryson Washington emerged after missing the first couple games. And I think all of that really came together nicely. But Sawyer Robertson's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I personally think he and Sam Levitt are the two best quarterbacks in the Big 12. He right now, heading into this year, he's got the top QBR in the country from last season. He was in top 6 in the nation last year with a bunch of really good players who are now in the NFL now. So I think he's tremendous. He's a tremendous leader and a guy that I know Baylor fans are extremely excited about. I don't know that they've been this excited about a quarterback probably since Seth Russell back in 2015. So it's been a long time since I think Baylor's been like, man, there's a quarterback back there that's going to win them football games. And I think that's kind of the difference that he brings to the table.
Well, you talked about the offensive line, some experience coming back for Baylor along that offensive front. What do you feel like the strength is for them? As far as are they balanced, like really good run and pass blocking, or is it really, when Auburn turns on the tape after the game, these are the areas where you're going to say, man, Baylor should have dominated here in the run game. What do you feel like the strength of that offensive line is?
Yeah, so again, it's another one of those changes that happened for Baylor in the middle of the season. They put Sidney Fugar in at right tackle, and that changed everything for them. It was kind of right after the bye week, and then they went to Texas Tech and beat Tech in Lubbock bad. I think it was by like 24, 28 points, something along those lines. It was not very close at all. And so that was a huge change for them. And from that point on, they become very balanced. They ran the football exceptionally well, multiple 200-yard plus performances on the ground. They kept Sawyer Robertson clean. They moved the ball efficiently. And I think it's interesting because I like to look at this from a matchup standpoint. And I think Baylor's pretty balanced and pretty good in many facets of the offensive line. But I will say, I don't think they've quite been tested from an edge standpoint like Auburn will be able to test them. And so I think that area kind of favors Auburn. And then I think the middle part of the offensive line probably favors Baylor a little bit. So okay. I think that's kind of the battle, right? Is I think if you're Auburn, you're like, man, we need to get these guys in 3rd and long situations so you can really utilize your pass rush. And if you're Baylor, it's like, we need to be getting 3 yards, 4 yards up the middle with these inside zone schemes to kind of keep those edge rushers at bay.
Okay. So I mean, let's talk about that. So you already talked about scheme a little bit, inside zone, primarily what they're going to be doing using that. So is it the style of offense? Is it more of a traditional drop back? Are we doing more RPO spread stuff? What's happening on the Baylor offensive scheme side?
Air raid, and they will spread you out. They use inside zone concepts. Last year, they actually put in a wrinkle and used the wide zone a little bit, but from the shotgun, which was really interesting because that's actually what Baylor ran prior to last year when they had Jeff Grimes as their offense coordinator. Jake Spavital comes in, completely changed kind of everything about their offense. They're going to throw it all over the place. They're going to run a lot of screens. They're going to run the football up the middle. They're going to take rail shots down the sideline. They're really going to be just kind of try to attack Auburn in a bunch of different ways. But I will say this, I think pretty plain and simply, Baylor has to be able to run the football. And I think Auburn has to be able to stop the run. And if one of those things doesn't happen, then I think it drastically favors the other team. And when you watch the bowl game that Baylor played against LSU, LSU stopped the run. Now, Baylor didn't have their best running back because he got hurt early in that game, but still it's that same proven concept. You have to be able to stop the run against Baylor. If you can do that, you can get them off schedule and I think make them very much less efficient.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these skill players. You mentioned best running back wasn't there during the bowl game versus LSU, but Baylor has a lot of really talented skill position players at both the running back and wide receiver, particularly the wide receiver position. Talk to me a little bit about where they are right now going into fall camp with health and the guys that they've got available there.
Well, I don't know, man. I think Bryson Washington might be a little upset if you think the wide receiver core is bringing in more talent, because Bryson Washington might be the best running back in the entire conference. And honestly, I mean, you go look around at the entire nation, and he is up there. He is very, very talented. He kind of bursted onto the scene though, missed the first 2 games. Came on a little bit slow at the beginning and then just ran all over the teams that they were playing. The schedule was a little bit weaker. You ran over a few bowl teams, but most of those teams were a little bit better on the offensive side. Like TCU ends up winning 9 games, but very much an offensive team, not a defensive team. And Baylor just ran the ball, and Bryson Washington is fantastic. So he's kind of the first part of this, right? Because I'm talking about them needing to be able to run the football.
Right.
He is kind of the guy behind that they're going to have to utilize, and really Auburn's going to try to stop him. Now, at wide receiver, they do have talent, and they got guys returning. 3 of them in particular. Josh Cameron, he had 10 touchdowns last year, a really good jump ball threat, good after catch. He's one of the best punt returners in the country. So you kind of see that skill set put on display when he catches the ball in the open field. Very strong, very physical, was a former walk-on, which is kind of hard to believe with how he's kind of turned into the player that he has.
No disrespect to the running back, but Josh Cameron's the guy that jumps off of the film when I watch Baylor from last year. And so like I immediately am thinking, okay, this is a guy that you have to make sure that you have a game plan to get him involved. If you're a Baylor offensive coordinator, it's like you got to get the ball in this guy's hands, and he's dynamic when he does get it there.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's so physical and so strong, and just another tremendous leader on this team. You know, he's been at Baylor for a long time. And he and Sawyer Robertson clearly have a really good connection on the field. So they're going to work him in early and often. He truly is the alpha in the wide receiver room. They brought in a lot of talented guys from the transfer portal. When you look at Kobe Prentice, who is at Alabama, so I'm sure y'all are familiar with him. Brought him in. Cole Wilson from Texas State, as Baylor continues kind of their pipeline with Texas State receivers, because they also have Ashton Hawkins, who's a returner, a guy who came back this year, a very good player from the slot. Kind of a little bit of a matchup problem. He's a very interesting guy. He'll play outside. He'll play inside. He's not the biggest dude, but he just gets open. And then you got Michael Trigg at tight end, who's a returner. Yeah, former top 150 recruit in the 2021 class. Just not a guy that any team really wants to deal with. And I think he's going to have a very big season. Last year he was very good, but I think this year there's another level that he can get to.
Yeah, Michael Trigg, super talented. I think he was initially at Ole Miss, if I'm not mistaken, went over to Baylor there. Definitely remember him from his Ole Miss days. So, again, the skill positions, I think, at Baylor are dynamic, and this is a team, you know, I've talked about this on our channel. I'd be surprised if Auburn wins this game. They wouldn't have. I feel like they're going to have to score in the 30s to even be in this. Like, I just think that Baylor's offense is that good, and that's not disrespectful to what I think Auburn's defense can be. But there's a lot of youth on Auburn's defense, and trying to figure out how to incorporate all those things. I think the ceiling for Auburn's defense is great. Game 1, they're going to get a huge test from a team that I think is going to throw it all over the yard. They're going to, like you said, spread you out, and then just try to figure out how to confuse what you're doing with a lot of different looks. You know, we saw Spavital a little bit as Auburn fans when he was at Cal as the offensive coordinator, but I think the skill level of the players that he has on this offense, I think it trumps what they were on that Cal team. So definitely looking forward to seeing how that pans out in game 1. So we talked offense. Anybody else you want to mention before we move on there from the offensive perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the main contributors. They brought in a few other transfers, one late addition who might play a bigger factor than I think people realize is Lewis Brown, the fourth. He transferred in. He played last year at San Diego State, transferred to Colorado State, left Colorado State to Baylor in the summer. So a late addition, but another bigger receiver. Baylor's got a lot of small receivers. If you look at their kind of roster, a lot of guys that are right around 5'11", but then you got Josh Cameron at 6'1", 6'2", and then Lewis Brown comes in. He's more of your 6'2", 6'3" type receiver. So he gives them a little more size on the outside, which I think is going to be pretty important, especially later in the season when you need guys to go up and make more contested catches. You're not going to be able to just scheme everything. I think he could be a guy who maybe factors in that people don't quite realize. And then the other part of that, just really quickly, is Baylor is bringing in a new right tackle who was on the team last year, but he did not play. He did not start. So that's the only starter they're replacing on the offensive line. And the reason I bring that up is because of Auburn's pass rush. They're probably going to try to attack him a little bit. He is a vet. He's been around the program for a long time, played a lot last year, but was not the starter. So Baylor's still trying to break in a new right tackle.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Baylor's offense, something that I'm high on. I think that they've got a dynamic ability over there to potentially put up some points, and Auburn's going to need to figure out how to return serve. In order to do that returning of serve, they're going to have to deal with the Baylor defense. We'll talk about that. We are here on the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport, in here with my guy Grayson, talking a little bit Baylor football. Grayson, we've talked about the offense. Let's talk a little Baylor defense. And last year, the Baylor defense underwhelming. Like, let's just just call it what it is. Injuries hurt them a lot last season, but you've got, in my opinion, over the last 15 years, a top 10, 15 defensive mind in your head coach there. And I expect him to get that right over there on the Baylor defensive side. He's in charge of a lot of things, but he's going to make sure that defense has the scheme at least necessary. Who are the guys that are going to be executing that scheme that Auburn fans are going to look at and say, man, this guy really wrecked the game plan?
Right. There's quite a few moving pieces here and a lot of new faces that Dave Aranda brought in. Keep in mind, he took over the defense last year, so he was the defensive coordinator. I mean, for Baylor fans, it's kind of like finally, because they needed him to do that. And so first year, they didn't quite have the talent. And you kind of saw it at times last year. Just did not have the talent to compete in the secondary, did not have the talent to create a consistent pass rush. So this year, they kind of tried to correct those and get more talent in the room to help Dave Aranda actually be able to be unique with his schemes, which is what he was known for at LSU. Just really a mastermind with the way that he could kind of move different pieces and bring blitzes from different areas. And he's going to try to replicate some of that at Baylor. So I would say, this defense starts with a few guys. Jackie Marshall up front, big dude, really good player, really effective, very good athlete. He's actually, from Louisiana, so not a Texas kid, but a really, really good player and a guy who I think people are going to get to know a little bit better this year. He played a lot last year, was really good, played a lot the year before, but this year I think there's another level that he can get to, potentially an all Big 12 type player this season. Then at linebacker, you got Keaton Thomas, who is probably the best linebacker in the Big 12. He was on the all Big 12 team last year. He's going to surprise some people. I think he's going to end up being an NFL draft pick after this year, and he still has more years of eligibility remaining. But he is a fantastic athlete. He's going to blitz. He's going to make tackles in the open field. He's going to cover running backs, going to cover tight ends. He does so much for this defense. I think from a talent standpoint, he is their best defensive player.
Keaton Thomas is the guy who jumps off the field again. When you turn the film on, I'm like, okay, who jumps off? Keaton Thomas. Yeah.
Right. And I think it also has to do with the scheme that Baylor runs. It's very advantageous to their linebackers because the whole goal up front is to take up blockers. And then you allow your linebackers to really feast. And that's what Keaton Thomas does. And he's a very good blitzer. Very interesting. At Big 12 Media Days, Dave Aranda said this is the best linebacking core he's ever had. And that is just, I mean, when you hear that, that's kind of buzzing because he has had some amazing units at LSU and at Wisconsin. But at Baylor, he's got Keaton Thomas. He's got Phoenix Jackson, who transferred him from Fresno State, a really good blitzer, a guy who's going to be trying to get in the backfield a whole lot. And then Travion Barnes, who transferred him from Florida International. So a lot of vets at the linebacker core and guys they feel really, really comfortable with. In the secondary, it becomes a little bit more challenging. They're trying to rebuild some stuff back there because they struggled a year ago. The two guys that really stand out back there, though, are Carl Williams at star, kind of a nickelback, slot corner. He'll do a lot of different things. He was hurt a lot last year, so I don't think anyone saw his best football yet, but they're very high on him. And then Devin Bobby, who's the veteran at safety. He'll play their deep safety, field safety spot. I mean, he's a guy who really came on at the end last year. I think he had 3 interceptions in their final 4 games. So really kind of peaked at the right time. And so they're hoping that continues following what everyone says was his best spring.
Okay. I mean, so listen, Auburn fans familiar with the scheme that is going to be deployed there because defensive coordinator formerly at Baylor came over to Auburn, was there for a year. They run the same scheme. So it's going to be interesting to see that scheme being deployed out there from Dave Aranda, who is I think an aggressive play caller on the defensive side. So, and he's going to need to do that. Your thoughts? I don't know how much you've looked into him, but you've been covering there in the state of Texas for a while. The Auburn quarterback Jackson Arnold from the state of Texas, and now first year at Auburn, was of course at Oklahoma last season. Thoughts on just what Jackson Arnold might be, and the things that you feel like maybe would be advantageous for Baylor when you look at what Jackson Arnold brings as a quarterback?
It's interesting. I got to see him a couple times in camp settings in high school as well. I was pretty high on him. I felt like he was going to be a really good player, and he goes to Oklahoma and I think his confidence got shot. I think just that team did not put together a great environment for him. I think everyone can kind of recognize that. He did not play his best, but I think there were those factors that really contributed to that. And frankly, I mean, I would say going into this matchup, I mean, and for Auburn as a team in general, if Jackson Arnold turns into the player that he was as a high school recruit, then Auburn might very well win the SEC. But the problem is he's never shown that. And so it's just a matter of where does it lie? Is he one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC? Does he fall in the middle, or does he kind of completely tail off and Auburn has to turn to one of their other quarterbacks? We'll see. But I think in this matchup, if he comes in and plays really well, there's going to be opportunities. Baylor revamped their pass rush a little bit. They revamped their nose tackle position. But that secondary still is somewhat vulnerable. And it's an area that they tried to address all offseason. They brought in Paul Gonzalez from TCU to kind of come in and help their pass game defense and kind of be a coordinator in that regard for the secondary. So they're still trying to rebuild some parts. They got guys coming back, but it's just a matter of how much did they improve over one off season. And the other part of this is Auburn's got some of the best receivers Baylor's probably going to face all year. I mean, they got some of the best receivers in the country. And so that's an area that if Jackson Arnold plays really well, then you could see a performance, that he throws for 300 and something yards and Auburn just continues to find success and they're able to move the football a lot through the air. But if he doesn't play well, I think that's going to be a huge problem, especially on the road.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the other portion of that, which is the run game. How stout is Baylor against the run? Is this something where, if Jackson Arnold is struggling, Auburn can turn and lean on the run game a little bit, maybe a little RPO and use his legs? Is that something that Baylor is equipped to handle as far as their ability, speed and space, or bearing down the trenches?
Again, I think this is one of those questions where it just, you look at kind of what they did in the offseason and they got a lot bigger at nose tackle, specifically to stop the run. Samu Tamanu Pepe came in from Texas A&M, this guy that weighs nearly 380 pounds on the defensive line. They also brought in Adonis Freelu from Tulane, who weighs 346 pounds. So they've completely revamped the nose tackle position just for this type of matchup. And I think it's a situation where they got a lot bigger on the defensive line. Their linebackers are really good. They're going to try to be better in that area of stopping the run, especially stopping the run with more of, with only 5 or 6 guys, not having to stop the run with, 7 guys. And I felt like at times last year, they kind of had to overcompensate for how bad they were in the secondary, that they ended up giving up rushing yards in bunches at times. I think Jackson Arnold's legs could be a factor in this game as well. That's something that I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on. But I think in general, Baylor's doing everything they can to try to get better there. And I will say that the last time they had a big nose tackle, someone that actually was a difference maker there, that's when they made it to the Big 12 championship with Apuika. And so if they can get back to anywhere near that, it should help the entire defense as a whole stop the run. I'm also a little bit curious about what Auburn's going to do at running back. I know their offensive line's really good. I know their quarterback's mobile, but their running back's a little unproven after losing Jarquez Hunter. So I'm curious kind of how that matchup goes, and honestly how much they want to give carries to the running back and how much they trust that position in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Freeze has been very adamant that he wants to remain balanced offensively. He doesn't want to just go out there and throw it a bunch. And it's going to likely be running back by committee for Auburn. So, dealing with some injuries right now in fall camp as to how the reps are being portioned there. But it's a deep running back room as far as guys I think that they trust. But that it's still up in the air as far as who's going to emerge as the ultimate running back leader for that room. But the guy with the experience is Damari Alston. But as you said, unproven. He hasn't had the ball a lot in his hands during any of his years, and he's coming up into his senior year here. So all right. Well, we have talked offense. We've talked defense. There are 3 phases to the game. We've hinted at one of those guys that's going to be in Josh Cameron, a dynamic kick returner. But Baylor has a good special teams. Let's talk a little bit about that. Special teams guys. Now, we were talking a little bit before we started. You said Baylor's got one of the best punters that are out there. Let me just say this. I really like, in the back of my mind, I hated hearing you say that, reliving last season for Auburn, where it seemed like every punter that faced Auburn was a guy who was pinning Auburn down inside the 10-yard line every other time. I was just like, yo, did they just transplant the spirit of Ray Guy into every punter right before this game? But it seems as if out the gate, Auburn's going to be facing another guy who's going to be a prolific punter. Talk to me a little bit about the special teams.
If you want to have some nightmares, go watch Baylor versus Utah in week number 2 and watch Palmer Williams just absolutely just punting the ball. I think he had like a 70-something yard punt that ended up, I think it got them pinned inside the 5. I mean, just some ridiculous stuff. Palmer Williams is a great punter, one of the best punters in the nation. You don't talk too much about that because it's special teams and
right.
People don't care about it until it affects them, right? Until someone starts missing field goals or you keep getting pinned inside the 5. But he is a difference maker, definitely for Baylor special teams unit. And then I mentioned Josh Cameron in the punt return game. Phenomenal punt returner. I think he probably would have been a first-team All-American had he had enough punts. I don't think he was eligible because he didn't have enough returns, but he was really, really effective in that area. He's again, one of the best returners in the Big 12, probably in the country. Kick return, they lost their best kick returner from last year, Jamal Bell, but they got plenty of speed guys, some guys that'll impact the game. And then kicking wise, they're actually going to break in a new kicker. Their kicker transferred in the offseason, but it was because he lost the position battle. So don't exactly know what they're going to get from it, but the hope is for Baylor that it's an upgrade from what they had a year ago. So pretty good special teams, I would say, for Baylor, definitely trending upwards, but I would say kicking is probably the biggest question mark just because haven't seen Connor Hawkins or Red Armstrong do that yet.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I hate to hear the thing about the punter because that was one of the things that just frustrated me so much is watching Auburn have to start so many drives inside their own 10 last year and then try to figure out with an offense that wasn't exactly the best offense in the world last season, figure out how to drive the length of the field consistently is just not a winning proposition.
It's rough.
So hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully Auburn's going to figure out a way to block some punts or something. I don't know, man. That does not feel good. All right. So again, we've gone through all 3 phases here. And you've talked a little bit about some of the things that you feel like are concerning, right? So maybe the matchup between the Baylor secondary and the Auburn wide receivers is something that we definitely want to look at. And then on the opposite side, something that Auburn fans definitely want to pay attention to, and that is the interior defensive line of Auburn versus the interior offensive line of Baylor. Just we're sitting a couple of weeks away from what this game is going to be. Do you think that that's going to be the most telling stat, that second one that we just talked about? Like, what's the yards per carry, what Baylor is doing in the run game? If you go back and you look at it and you're like, man, you circle one stat, you feel like that was the one that's going to stand out the most?
Yep. Yards per carry is going to be a big one. And a lot of it is kind of one of those things where if you look at it and Baylor ends up with 4 yards per carry, but you got to kind of look at it as, yeah, but how'd they get those 4 yards? Are they getting every, 4th and 1? Because Baylor's going to go for it a lot. Are they getting every, 3rd and 3? Like those type of things are what Baylor wants to make Auburn be very nervous on 4th and 1 because they're struggling to stop the run. And if Baylor can get to that point, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for Auburn to win this game. Again, this road environment is not something that Auburn hasn't seen, right? I mean, in the SEC, you see these great environments all the time, but I think the Baylor crowd's really going to show up for this game. Like I talked about, this is one of the most anticipated seasons going into the season that I've seen in a long time, because, you know, they won the Big 12 championship in 2021, but they were coming off of a bad season. So you weren't exactly expecting the full turnaround. And in 2019, they made it to the Big 12 championship game. But again, 2018, they were a 7-win team. And so again, you don't know if that's actually going to happen. This year, the expectation is for Baylor to win the Big 12 championship. And the expectation is for, you know, Baylor to potentially make the college football playoff if they do win that game. And so I think this crowd is going to be really intense. I think this crowd's going to be really, really good. And I think if Baylor's getting those 4th and 1s and winning up front, I think that will be the most telling thing of this game, because I think on the other side of it, it's kind of like, if Auburn can hit enough big plays, that's great. But if you don't have the ball enough because Baylor's running the football and Auburn's getting worn down on the defensive side, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, that kind of grinding drives out is going to take a toll eventually.
Okay, war of attrition for Baylor there, trying to make sure that they're winning. So I'm going to circle then now to a secondary stat, and that's time of possession. So I'll be looking at yards per carry, time of possession as 2 key stats for me to take a look at. I plan on trying to make the trip to Waco for this game. So hopefully I will get an opportunity to experience that environment there in person. But Grayson, I appreciate you taking a little time to educate the Auburn fans a little bit about the Baylor Bears, and I look forward to talking with you more as we get closer to this game. One more time before you get out of here, tell the people how they can keep up if they want to find out more about what's going on with Baylor.
Just check out SicEm365.com. Check out SicEm365 YouTube page, also a podcast feed if you want to hear more content. We're getting close to that time period where we're going to be talking probably quite a bit about Auburn, especially as the weeks go on, as Baylor finishes up fall camp and all of those things. So that's where you can find all the content. We talk mainly about just Baylor. We'll talk a little Big 12 here and there, but it's pretty much just Baylor content. And yeah, it's pretty great. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it again. Once again, we are here, Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. You know, you can stay locked in with us right here on the YouTube channel for the War Report. If you're out there in podcast land, go ahead and give us that 5-star review. And we appreciate you taking a little time to listen to us today. We'll be back at you with more great War Report content. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle, we are out of here.